Right, so I'm here to give you an update on XFP. We've been really busy the last 6 months. I think our last academy was in Manchester back in December time. So I've got loads of new features to kind of discuss and show you guys. Hopefully you're aware of some of them, maybe not all of them, so we'll kind of crack on. So I've got another update slide and new feature slide. So probably the biggest change that we've made within the last 6 months is by adding conditional logic in. Hands up if any of you have seen the sort of conditional logic, started using it. Yeah, there's a few of you around. The intention is that it replaces the PHP calculations in the classic form builder. So it allows you to build if-else style logics. And they can range in kind of complexity, so you can have really simple ones. So if customer chose green bin, then set a value this. Otherwise, return a different value. Or they can go really complicated, like if it's January the 1st, then they're going on to this subscription plan. If it's February, then they're going to a different subscription plan. So anything that we used to be able to do in PHP, we can now do in conditional logic. So you've got a wide range of operators that you can use. So your standard kind of is equal to, not equal to, less than, greater than, all those style of logics, operators. The really neat thing about conditional logic is that we can kind of create nested logics. So if you need to use a result from a web service, so maybe you're pulling information in from Bartek, CXM, any other kind of system, Northgate, for example, we can use the predefined logics that already exist to pull in those values and then use if-else conditions on them. And we can nest additional logics, so we can kind of create a whole kind of tree of kind of complexity. Where can you use them? You can use them basically anywhere where you can use the other logics. So within page level branching, within pre-filling user information and questions, rules, and in your templates. The other bit that we've got on this is that you can make a definition. Now I'll come into definitions in a second. So what's it look like? Looks like that. We haven't put any details in there. That's probably kind of a sort of semi-complex one where you've got if, ors, ands, various return values. It can expand and all that. And we've added a bit of color to the CMS. So definitions are basically something that you define at a global level. There's 3 different types that you can define. You can have a specific date. Where might you use that? Well, if your garden waste subscription renews on the 1st of April every year, you would set up a definition for garden waste renewal date. And any form that uses or interacts for the garden waste service could use that within their conditions to do whatever logic they need to do. And if the date changes, if the service changes, so you go from 1st of January to the 31st of December, you just have to update your definition and then your forms will all take that new date. Date calculations allow us to basically create a new date based on the current time that it's run. Misbin forms, if you only accept misbin submissions after the waste crews have come back in, say that they're all done by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you can say a calculation could be today at 2 p.m. And then that will convert it into a timestamp, and we can use that to within conditional logic to say that it's too soon to report your misbin because our crews are still out. And then constants are kind of just a string value which you just want to define and give it a better name. So when we integrate with external systems, we normally end up working with codes, some ID values, anything that, you know, they're not very descriptive, they're very difficult to understand. We can just give that an actual friendly, readable name to represent that. So that's the definition, and setting up a definition looks like that. So on this particular one, I've set it up as a formula for today at 1:30 p.m. And that will kind of, our logic can then use that. So moving on from conditional logic, one of the features that we introduced probably 18 months ago to 2 years ago was event booking. Quite a lot of our customers now use it, and I'm constantly getting kind of feedback from it. Can it do this? Can we do that? So we've kind of got a whole program of work designed for event booking. And recently we just released the next step in that. So we've made it easier to to set up booking periods. Previously, you could choose between an all-day booking or 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. or a start or end time. You can now define your booking periods. So on Monday, you could say that it's possible to book between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. On Wednesdays, they only work in the morning, so it will be 8 a.m. to 12 noon. So we can define those periods, and those periods are basically up to you to define them. You can give everybody a lunch break if you so wish, or various sort of times. The other thing that we've introduced, which we've been asked of a lot, is a cut-off time before we'd accept a booking for a particular period. So this could be that your service, to go collect a bulky waste item, you don't want to be asked to you don't want your customer to book it at midnight the day before they want it collecting, because your waste crews aren't going to be in, it's not going to be possible to organise it all. So we can set the cut-off time for that to be 4 p.m. the day before. So any booking period can have its own cut-off time, which allows you to determine how much notice you need in order to fulfill that booking. Then we come into kind of the other nicer bits of it. Previously, you'd just get the date of the booking. Now we can provide additional information through the variables, so we can kind of say what the start time, end time, what weighting that particular booking is being given, the calendar that it's using, the various details. And basically, if we know something about the booking, we've provided it to you as a variable. And you can push that into CXM or any other, put it in an email to the customer, anywhere where you need to use it. Then we've added the ability to pre-fill an event booking question. So at the moment, your customer would go to your form, they'd choose a date, they'd go off, finish the form, raise a case in CXM. What happens if the customer wants to change their booking? What happens if they need to rearrange it for some reason? Well, up until now, they'd have to probably contact the customer service team, they'd have to go in and try and find the booking and try and change it. Now we can just add a link in CXM to say, rearrange your booking. That will link back to a form and will pre-fill the event booking question with their existing booking, allowing them to then select a new date. Then once they've submitted that form, we can update the CXM case, update the waste management system, and nobody in customer services needed to be involved. So second part of that is being able to update, delete, move bookings using logics and hidden fields. So when we come back from CXM, we want to store the existing booking ID so that we can move it around. We might want to move or delete the booking so the customers cancel the booking. So that's all available too. Then we've got the SLA report. So how's your service doing? Is your service performing well if a customer has to choose a booking which is 6 weeks in the future, because that's the first available date that they've been provided. At the moment, you wouldn't know whether that was happening. Whereas with the SLA report, we'll tell you when the calendar was displayed and what the first available date the customer could choose from. It might be that you find that they are still booking it 6 weeks in the future, but without that information available to you, you can't make the decision on how your services could be improved. The slightly older version of the slides, because I had removed 0.7 because I figured it was just a bug. But when you were authorizing the Outlook integration, then you sometimes get a success and a fail message at the same time, but we've removed that. But it's not on the slides, but if you've used the event booking features, you're probably aware that every 3 months or so you've had to reauthorize Outlook. We have fixed that bug. That's no longer needed, although I should point out that the API keys that you enter do sometimes have a 2-year limit on the keys, which would then need to be regenerated and updated when those keys expire. But that's all configured in Outlook. That's just the how Outlook works. So I've got some pretty pictures. So on the top left, you've got the booking periods. And in here, I've kind of set up the different periods. So you'll notice how it's changed from previously. It was just tick boxes. On the top right, you've got how you set up a notice period. So you just put in the number of hours before that period. And then anything less than those number of hours, that period would no longer be available to the customer. And then at the bottom, you've got the SLA report. You can download the SLA report as a CSV file, stick it in Excel, and work out all your services things. So as with CXM, we've been working on performance improvements. There's a number of improvements that we've made recently. There's a number in the pipeline. So what we've already released is improvements to the loading speeds of the page template designer. Previously, when you went to the page template designer, you'd have a little progress bar going along, and that's when each individual question was being loaded into the page. It was great if you only had a few questions on it. When you had, as some of you have, I've seen them, 50 to 60 questions on a page, you'd be sitting there for 5 or 10 minutes while each question was being loaded in. So now we've changed that. We just get all the questions and we display it to you now. I think we've still got the progress bar for if it's really slow, but you shouldn't really see it. So hopefully you've seen that and you're aware that's happening. The next 3 items on here is when you're interacting with CXM, XFP needed to get information from CXM. So we'd need to, if you're submitting on behalf of a user, we'd need to see what the user's details were. We'd also need to check to see if CXM is available. There's been a few global network outages recently and all that sort of stuff. Anything when you're integrating with the system can affect it. So we were checking to see if CXM was available. And we were also checking for case details, even though the case that we were trying to find was obviously not a valid case. So all of these things combined sort of slowed down the system and made moving between pages slow. So we've improved the way that we handle those requests. The other thing that we've done is within the internals of XFP, we use different libraries to interact with web services. We've updated one of those libraries called Guzzle, which does give us performance improvements from that. Now, there's additional performance improvements coming out either late July or early August. These are very much under the hood. It's how we load various parts of the application in and how we run the rules engines and things like that. To you guys, you shouldn't notice any difference in terms of functionality, but hopefully you'll see a bit more speed and performance-wise, we're looking at quite a good performance gain from that. So then probably the number one thing that I get asked at every academy, although I wasn't asked it today, is why do I have to set a default value on a radio button? Every single time. Well, now you don't. So whoever's been asking me about that in the past, you don't. We've removed that requirement. The number of workarounds that people found for that, I think my favorite was to set it up as a drop-down list and then convert it back into a radio button. And yeah, so you don't have to do any of those workarounds. It was our number one requested feature. So we are listening. Then we've got a whole load of new predefined logics. Now, predefined logics are basically little bits of snippets that we can plug in input values and we can get an output value. So our services and our forms are becoming even more complicated. They're no longer just capture the information and email it to the back office. We now need to sort of check to see if the customer can actually report it or are they wasting our time. So most of the predefined logics that we've added are to allow us to manipulate dates, check addressing, things like that. So the first one we've added is the ability to add or subtract from a date. And you can choose between days and weekdays on it. Also, get a part of the date. So whether that's the day, month, year, or the week, or the actual week of the year. This can all be combined and pushed into CXM. Run your rules in CXM to say that if the week of the year is on the odd week of the year, then send out notifications to them this week. If it's an even week of the year, send them out this week. So we can basically get any part of the date that we want to. Before conditional logic, we added a predefined logic to compare two values. So this allows us to basically say, is a value greater than, less than, equal to, and all those sort of things. And then return true or false. It's a very simplified version of conditional logic, but it can still have its uses. And then substring. Now, substring might seem like a strange one. Why do I want a substring? Well, with kind of multiple choice questions, you basically have one value, but quite often we want that same value to be the same on every option because I don't know, I've seen it a few use cases. My mind's gone a bit blank now. What this allows us to do is basically put our substrings together and have multiple different parts of the option value that we can then use to drive branching, to pass into our back office system, and things like that. And we can use substring to capture that part. So that's one new thing. Gone too far. Then we've added the ability to check to see if a property is within our LLPG data. So if you're using CXM, single point, Esri, then we get the entire kind of UK data address set. But we're only interested in the properties that we're servicing. You know, we don't care about a place down in Cornwall. Yeah, I'm only saying that because he's in front of me. So we only want to know about properties which are in Birmingham, and this allows us to check to see if our property is within our service area. So it's quite a simple one. You just pass in the UPRN, it returns true or false. Then we might want to check to see what ward it's in. So if we're reporting something, we need to know where it needs to go, whether or not it goes to a service team which handles that particular ward. We can get the ward from the CMS LLPG data. For those of you who use single point, we can query single point for various parts of the address. When you use a single point address lookup, you get the label for the address, so kind of 1 Maris Court, Leicester, or you get the UPRN. Well, with this predefined logic, we can drill into that a little bit more. We can get the individual parts. Especially useful on that one is the USRN, so that will give you the street that your property's on. And then, so Swindon was probably going, we've had this for ages. And you're right, Swindon have had the SLA date predefined logic for ages. But it's finally made its way back into XFP. So SLA date allows you to calculate a date in the future for your SLAs, taking into account public holidays. So within CXM, I think you can say plus sort of 5 days or whatever. But those 5 days might include Easter Monday or something. So your SLA dates would be slightly out. With this logic, we're taking the GovUK data source. They publish public holidays as a JSON feed. So we take that and we can use that to figure out when what the SLA date would be with public holidays. And then you can push that into your CXM workflows and use it that way. So that's the end of the features. There are many more. Watching Robin's presentation this morning or this afternoon, he was talking about how with the addresses, they've got the logical status and how you can filter out historic properties and new builds and all that sort of stuff. The exact same features in XFP as well. But I forgot to put it on the slides. So, excuse me. Oh. So what have we got coming up? Well, Blue Badge integration. So there's the central government Blue Badge application service. We're doing a whole load of integration with that, so you can pull in the application details into a form. You can pull down the files and push them up into CXM, wherever you want to manage it. And I'm expecting that to come out. It's in our next release, so end of July kind of sort of time. Also making changes to the PDF generation, although anybody who's using PDF generation is probably going, yes, finally they've got rid of the mappings and all that sort of stuff. We haven't, not yet. I'm sorry to report. The changes to PDF generation is so that we can remove a security vulnerability that has to be proactively selected in order to use the feature. There's, not without going too technical, we have to run a Java program in order to generate the PDFs. And to do that, we have to allow access to the file system. We're changing it so that we don't have to do that anymore. So those two features will be coming out over the next few weeks. And then kind of going a little bit further out, kind of sort of September, October time, hoping to get some improvements to the data export. Lots of kind of, it's being scoped at the moment. We've got a few customers reading through our plans, kind of feeding back on that. So if you are interested in data export, I know I'm the last talk of the day, but come and grab me before you leave, and I'll share our plans with you. I'd love your feedback before we start actually developing it. The idea is that we can run schedules and we can kind of have a central place to manage our exports. And then also kind of in sort of that sort of time period, I'm well aware that repeatable questions, everybody loves them, but they can't use them because they can't get the data out of them. That's what we're working on, to be able to open up them so that we can, so that you can use them, basically. Then longer term plans, we've got kind of migration tools from legacy to new form builder, improvements to direct debits. I've spent a lot of time recently talking to FCC, who are our partners in direct debits, and they've got some ideas on how we can improve it and improve the workflow for that. So we kind of work with them to make the experience easier and nicer to manage. Some more reporting improvements. I think that was on the CXM one as well. That's kind of a parallel piece of work. SQL connectors, being able to just simply connect to a database somewhere. I know that that comes up quite a bit when you're building forms. And also XFP and Galaxies, so being able to have Galaxies sites with running XFP. So obviously things in the pipeline, I've just kind of gone through it. We've got data export and repeatable question variables. That's what our focus will be on for the next few months, as well as kind of quality of the product and kind of closing off those little holes in there. I think Sarah already went through the process for the feature request, so I'm not going to repeat the same slides. But our current top 5 feature requests at the moment is the being able to use the CXM case link during edit and transition actions. At the moment, the case link would only work when you've created a case. But sometimes you're not creating a case, you're editing or you're transitioning a case. That's the number 1 feature request at the moment. The monthly export option is part of the new data export piece of work, so hopefully we'll be able to close that off fairly soon. Then, rather strangely, pay bridge order number variable, which seems fairly simple and probably we should have had it a while ago, but being able to get the pay bridge order in there. Renaming PDFs and also being able to add the reply to sender to an email. So they're the top 5 at the moment. If you go to the Jadu support site, there's a directory on there with all the XFP feature requests which have been submitted so far. Browse around, have a look. If there's any others any in there where you go, oh, you know what, I'd really love that. That's great. Email me, let me know. Then we can add that to the score, and then that will bump it up a bit. And then thank you. Happy to take questions now, or if you want to come and grab me before you leave, then that's fine.